If it had not been for Tom Brady, there's a very strong chance that Joe Montana would still be heralded as the greatest player in NFL history. He rose to dominance and bullied the league for a decade, and he was a part of the greatest head coach, quarterback, wide receiver trio of all time. But the road to success was no walk in the park for Joe. Adversity was constantly present, especially early in his career. If there's any lesson to take away from his career, patience is a virtue. As you will be refreshed or learn, there was a reason why fans and former teammates would call him Cool Joe. He just had a way to be calm and overcome the most difficult challenges. Sadly, as time continues to pass and new players begin to enter the league, the legacies of the legends that originally paved the way are, at times, forgotten in history. In an attempt to combat that, in this video we go back in time to Montana's childhood, college recruitment, collegiate career, his path to the draft, where he was selected, his NFL career, and what he accomplished following retirement to answer the overarching question of just how good was Joe Montana. Joe Montana was born on July 11, 1956, in New Eagle, Pennsylvania, to Joe Sr. and Teresa Montana. His parents both worked at a finance company, his father as a manager and his mother as a secretary. During high school, Montana was an incredible athlete and excelled in almost every sport that he tried. He excelled in football, basketball, and baseball. While nothing too notable would come during his time playing baseball, Montana was an elite basketball player and led Ringgold High School to the WPL Class AAA Basketball Championship and was also named to the All-State team. He would go on to receive a scholarship offer to play basketball at North Carolina State. However, as we know, he would choose to pursue football. Interestingly, he also committed to North Carolina State because they were one of the very few universities that would allow him to play basketball and football. As a football player in high school, Montana would have to wait until his junior year until he took over the team's starting quarterback. However, once he earned that spot, he did not look back. His senior year, he would be named as an All-American. As previously mentioned, Montana was very interested in going to North Carolina State, as they promised him that he would be able to play two sports. However, he would ultimately turn them down and choose another school, Notre Dame. One of the biggest factors in Montana joining the Fighting Irish is that Terry Hanratty, whom Montana grew up idolizing, attended the school. Despite Montana being one of the most talented prospects in his recruiting class, Montana would still struggle to see the field in his freshman season. This came mainly as the result of the immense talent that Notre Dame had on their roster at the time. In his freshman season, he would only participate in 7 games, throwing for 507 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions, while completing only 42.4% of his passes. Although Montana struggled through his freshman year, he was looking to make a big bounce back in his second season at Notre Dame. However, his progress would be cut short, and he would miss the entire 1976 season due to a shoulder injury. While many would allow this injury paired with already struggling to make up ground on the depth chart to end their football career, this would not be the case for Montana. Despite the subpar play in his freshman season and the shoulder injury forcing him to miss the entirety of his sophomore season, Montana would take over as the team's starting quarterback during his junior year. In the 9 games that he played in, Montana made a huge jump, throwing for 1,604 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, while completing 52.4% of his passes. With Montana at the helm, Notre Dame would finish the year with an incredible record of 11-1. Their only loss coming in the second week of the season against Ole Miss, where they would only lose by 7 points. Their final game of the year would come against the Texas Longhorns in the Cotton Bowl, where they would win in a dominant fashion by a final score of 38-10. The final season of Montana's career at Notre Dame would take place in 1978. This would be the strongest individual year that he had in college and would solidify him as an NFL caliber talent. In the 11 games that he played in, Montana would throw for 2,010 yards, 10 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions, while completing 54.2% of his passes. This would be a career high for him in both passing yards and completion percentage. The Fighting Irish would finish the season with a record of 9-3, and their final game of the season would come against the Houston Cougars in the Cotton Bowl. This would be a game that came down to the wire, and Montana had to play at an elite level for his team to stay in the game, and they would win by a final score of 35-34. Coming into the draft, scouts were not nearly as in love with Montana, in hindsight, as you would have thought based on his professional career. They were very high on his athletic ability at the quarterback position, leadership ability, and the fact that he was a proven winner. However, they were skeptical about his accuracy and whether he would be able to limit his turnovers on the professional level. Despite the gripes that some scouts had, there was no doubt that he would have his name called during the draft. However, they did not think of him as one of the more promising prospects out of the class. When the time would finally come for the 1979 NFL Draft, Montana would be selected in the 3rd round by the legendary coach and GM Bill Walsh, and the San Francisco 49ers with the 82nd overall pick, the final pick of the round. Shockingly, Montana would be far from the first quarterback off of the board. The Cincinnati Bengals would select Jack Thompson with the 3rd overall pick. The New York Giants selected Phil Simms with the 7th overall pick, and the Kansas City Chiefs chose Steve Fuller with the 23rd overall pick. With Montana only being a 3rd-round pick and the 49ers already having an established quarterback in Stephen McBurg, he would once again take some time to work his way up the depth chart. Through his first 2 seasons in the league, he would only start in 8 games of the 31 that he participated in. Over that stretch, he threw for 1,891 yards, 16 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions while completing 63.9% of his passes. Despite making big leaps and improving his accuracy compared to college, Montana would still struggle early on and led the 49ers to a record of 2-6 as a starter over his first 2 years in the league. In the 1981 season, Montana would finally earn the starting spot for the 49ers, and he would immediately establish himself as one of the NFL's top players. He finished his inaugural campaign as the starter, throwing for 3,565 yards, 19 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, while completing 63.7% of his passes. The 49ers would finish the regular season with a record of 13-3. Along with this, he finished 2nd in the MVP voting, 3rd in Offensive Player of the Year, made the All-Pro second team, and made his first Pro Bowl appearance. Despite this being his first trip to the playoffs, Montana showed no signs of inexperience and led the team to a Super Bowl victory over the Cincinnati Bengals by a final score of 26-21. Over the postseason, Montana would throw for 747 yards, 6 touchdowns, and 4 interceptions, while completing 63.6% of his passes. The following season would be a setback for Montana. He only started in 9 games due to a Players Association strike and led the team to a 3-6 record in that time. Although he had a very solid season as an individual, it would not translate to wins. The following season, 1983, would be a return to form for the 49ers. Montana would lead them to a 10-6 record. He finished the year throwing for 3,910 yards, 26 touchdowns, and 12 interceptions, while completing 64.5% of his passes. However, they would be eliminated in the second round of the playoffs. In 1984, after falling short of the second Super Bowl title of the Joe Montana era, San Francisco would be back with a vengeance. Joe Montana led the team to a record of 14-1 as a starter and threw for 3,630 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 10 touchdowns, while completing 64.6% of his passes. They would continue to steamroll teams in the postseason, with Montana throwing for 873 yards, 7 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions over only 3 games. Over the next 3 consecutive seasons, the 49ers would be bounced in their first game of the playoffs. Montana would continue to prove himself as one of the top talents that the game has ever seen. However, it did not translate to wins in the postseason. Shockingly, these 3 seasons would be the first 3 years that Jerry Rice would play with the team. Rice would end up being arguably the best wide receiver of all time and play an integral role in the 49ers' elite passing attack through this era. The 1988 and 89 seasons would be a historic run for San Francisco. Over this stretch, they would win 2 Super Bowls. The first was Montana's second Super Bowl matchup against the Cincinnati Bengals, which they won by a final score of 20-16. And the second was against the Denver Broncos, which ended up in a 55-10 demolition. Through these 2 postseason runs, he would throw for 1,623 yards, 19 touchdowns, and only 1 interception. However, this would be the final Super Bowl of his career. Despite having a starting record of 14-1 as a starter in the regular season, Montana and the 49ers would be defeated in the NFC Championship by the New York Giants. In this game, he would suffer a big hit that would leave him with an elbow injury that would leave him sidelined through the entirety of the 1991 season. The 1992 season would be Montana's last with the 49ers. The elbow injury would keep him sidelined until the final week of the regular season, when he would have another masterful performance. Despite this, with Steve Young emerging as a very talented option at the quarterback spot, they would decide to move forward with him heading into the 1993 season. In his final 2 years in the league, Montana would play for the Kansas City Chiefs. Despite him still being an elite talent, his age and injury history, paired with the Chiefs having a weaker roster, would lead to the team not having much postseason success. In his final 2 seasons, he would throw for a combined 5,427 yards, 29 touchdowns, and 16 interceptions. Montana would retire with 8 Pro Bowl appearances, 3 All-Pro appearances, 2 MVP awards, 4 Super Bowl titles, 3 Super Bowl MVP awards, and was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2000. Before the video ends, please share some of your favorite memories about Joe Montana in the comments. And if you want a video done on any of your favorite players, current or past time, let us know. After the NFL, Montana followed in his father's footsteps and took an interest in finance. He would dive into angel investing and help fund new companies. This has proven to be a very successful endeavor, and Montana has been one of the few players to grow his career earnings by such a substantial amount post-retirement. He resides on the coast of California and is into wine and horses. He's living an exquisite life. While it's rather funny how much modern-day quarterbacks make today, Joe has had to be pretty strategic with his finances in order to live the life he does now. His total career earnings while playing in the NFL are a little over $25.5 million. That would equal to be worth about $53 million in today's dollars. Quarterbacks today who have never won a Super Bowl are getting paid that in 1 year alone. That's for another video. Joe Montana is one of the most talented football players of all time. Had it not been for Brady's career, he still would be thought of as the best ever to take the field. He was a proven leader and an incredibly accurate passer, especially for his era. While his stats may not look as impressive to some that are posted today, in a quarterback-friendly era, I think most would take winning any day over statistics. His career numbers of 40,551 yards and 273 touchdowns, along with 4 Super Bowl titles, are still difficult for most quarterbacks to achieve. Winning is the ultimate feat, and Joe has 4 titles and rings to prove himself as one of the game's most elite players ever. Try and rank anyone over him. We'll be waiting. Thank you for watching The Halftime Show.